This was an insane war that brought us low economically, morally. We went to war against a guy who had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. It was a total pretext. It's inexplicable. And there you go to Cheney, there you go to Bush, there you go to the Jewish neocons who wanted to remake the world. Maybe I can say that because I'm Jewish.
Given what has been going on around the world, some of the key suspects come to mind: Osama bin Laden.
Indicators do seem to point to Osama bin Laden being responsible for this attack.
That they're looking at is Osama bin Laden. It was just last Friday that the U.S. State Department put out a worldwide caution to American citizens traveling abroad and also to U.S. government facilities, and they said that terrorism knows no limits, whether it's...
Indicators do seem to point to Osama bin Laden being responsible for this attack.
There was this grand conspiracy of the neocons, and you said Jewish neocons, that they somehow went to war on a pretext for the state of Israel.
Time now to go to Germany and speak with independent journalist Lars Scholl. Lars, welcome to the Kaiser Report.
Hi, Max.
Okay, Lars Scholl, you've just published an investigation into insider trading in relation to the attacks of 9/11. First, tell us about the original mainstream media reports and what had they said at the time about the suspicious trading.
Well, there were a lot of reports in Barron's, in the Wall Street Journal, and other publications which said that insiders of the terror attacks could have profited from those terror attacks via speculative trades, put options, call options, and such things. But then in October, November, December, it went on, but then was abruptly over with this reporting.
So how much had the put option volume increased prior to the attacks, and in what shares specifically?
Yeah, sometimes sixfold. For example, related to Raytheon, the producer of Tomahawk and Patriot missiles that were used then in the war on terror. But also, these were call options. And then there were also put options on banks that were placed in the WTC, and also reinsurers like Munich Re and Swiss Re, but also AXA. And these were put options, basically, where you bet that a stock price will drop.
Yes, well, in the case of the airline stocks, the put options, the volume and the prices, it appeared as though they were reflecting blown-up airlines before there were any blown-up airlines. And it reminded me at the time of what we saw happen with Morton Thiokol after the Space Challenger disaster. Those options traded spectacularly based on that explosion. Here we saw it happen before the explosion. Now, in the 9/11 Commission report also states that there was what looked like suspicious trading, but that on closer inspection, they said it was a reputable firm that had placed these airline put option trades. Tell us about this reputable firm, Alex Brown.
Yeah, it was Alex Brown, which is a subsidiary of Deutsche Bank. And they said that this is completely harmless. But what is really interesting here is that the executive director of the CIA at the time of the 9/11 attacks came directly from Alex Brown. And another interesting thing is that the CEO of Alex Brown, on the time of September 11th, on the next day he resigned from his post, even though he had still a contract for 3 years at Alex Brown. So this is a little bit strange, isn't it?
Well, it demonstrates a direct pipeline of information between the CIA, Alex Brown, where these put options are. And I believe after the events, something like $5 million in profits were never claimed, correct?
Yeah, there are different numbers out, but we can say something in between 2 million and 5 million, yes. But maybe I should mention one thing, that there are actually 3 scientific papers about this stuff. One came from the University of Zurich. Mark Chesney is the leading professor there. It's called Detecting Informed Trading in the Option Markets. And everyone who wants to question this topic should read this.
Okay, well, let's talk about Deutsche Bank, of course, is the bank that ended up buying Alex Brown. What has been their response as part of this investigation, Lars?
Yeah, it's the Deutsche Bundesbank, the central bank of Germany, because the head back then, in 2001, Ernst Möltke, said that informed trading occurred in the international markets. And I questioned, or I forwarded a request to the Deutsche Bundesbank, but they stonewalled. They were only available for me for an oral information, and that was basically that they said, well, the board of the Deutsche Bundesbank was informed on this stuff via charts and analysis from their own house, but they made no real own analysis. And the same applied to other places where I went. They all did not want to talk with me about this topic. Like, for example, the Deutsche Börse or Eurex, which is the futures market here in Germany, and the Swiss futures market. They don't want to talk about, for example, the results of the scientific paper of Professor Mark Chesney.
All right. Well, presumably there are insiders who would come forward if the government offered some kind of protection or interest in finding out more about this advanced knowledge insider trading around the events of 9/11. Those insiders who may have spoken directly with people involved in these trades would feel more comfortable speaking on the record if the government expressed some interest. Without that, however, certain insiders, I'm sure, will continue to stay behind the scenes. The inside information story in the U.S., of course, Congress is allowed to trade on inside information. So potentially, Buzzy Krongard, who you mentioned, and other Congress people and insiders in the intelligence industry potentially profiting from trading on these puts, and many of the millions of dollars were never collected at Alex Brown Deutsche Bank from the profiteering that went on from this. It's an inside information is legal, so you know, maybe they should take more pride in their prowess as traders and step forward and let people know that they're such good traders. If they're going to have insider trading, Lars, why can't people be more braggadocio about their success trading on inside information? Your thoughts?
Well, I think the inconvenient stuff here is that the trade was not organized in an Afghan cave. And this is basically the official story, that the terror attacks came from somewhere in the Orient and were not fabricated on home turf in the USA itself.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to determine exactly where the planning for the attacks came from, but clearly there was enough insider information inside the U.S. ahead of the attacks to, at the very least, they could have prevented the attacks. Clearly somebody in Washington felt it was in their interest to profit from the attacks, but they put that ahead of the interest of those who suffered catastrophic loss during the attacks. And that has become kind of the story of the American policy going forward, isn't it? The bankers, it's a great microcosm of what's happened since then. The bankers put their interest and their profits ahead of people. It doesn't matter if people die in the U.S. or die overseas. Their profits come first. Your thoughts, Lars?
Well, the funny thing is, you talk a lot about financial terrorists, and here we have terror traders, period.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this has become the de facto modus operandi of the U.S. All right, well, certainly it's a story that is worth keeping an eye on. Lars Scholl, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Kaiser Report.
It raises a suspicion of a cover-up by the CIA of activities that they're not proud of activities they think the public ought not to know about.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Question 911 was to be labeled an anti-Semite. Even more bizarre, those who questioned the tragedy were equated with Holocaust deniers. And I wondered why. By demanding an independent investigation of what happened on September 11th, I became a political pariah. I was vilified in the press and the noose tightened around my district. The pro-Israel lobby found someone to run against me, gave her over $1 million for her campaign, and then managed to make the election turn out the wrong way.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.